Last year I decided to make a full upgrade to my camera and lens system. I moved completely from the Canon EF line to the Canon mirrorless RF line. I knew my EF lenses weren't going to cut it on the RF system, and I wanted to pick up some high quality glass, but I was also putting up money for a new camera body, so I knew I couldn't get a ton of lenses. I decided that I could get 2 high quality RF L lenses. Since I do a large variety of photo and video projects like weddings, portraits, events, not to mention YouTube, I knew I needed these 2 lenses to cover basically every range that I could possibly need for all of this stuff. Prime lenses? Out of the question. Some people will argue that they are kind of versatile, but maybe some people can get away with 2 prime lenses and that's all they need, but for me personally, I need a little more range. I just knew that the extra quality I'd be getting with prime lenses wouldn't be worth the sacrifice of the versatility that comes with zooms. So eventually I decided on the RF 24-70 f2.8 and the 70-200 f2.8. They're both L lenses, so I knew they'd be sharp and they cover basically every focal length I could need, with the exception of some wide angle stuff, but we'll get into that. Today we're going to be looking at this lens in particular, the 24-70, because although I love the 70-200, this lens does almost everything for me. It's become my total workhorse lens that I use for pretty much every project for the past year now. And I want to talk about why. Let's start with the list of people I wouldn't recommend this lens to because it's pretty short. The shining feature of this lens is that it does a little bit of everything pretty well, but it doesn't do any one thing amazing. So I wouldn't recommend this lens to people who know they're only doing one specific thing with their photography or video. For example, if you're only doing product photography, get a macro lens, or if you're only shooting wildlife, get a super telephoto lens, or if you're only doing portraits in a very specific style, get a 50mm f1.2. But for those of you who are shooting stuff like a wedding where you don't have time to switch out lenses when you need to change focal lengths, or if you're a photographer who's doing a little bit of everything and you can't afford more than one lens right now, I think it's a much better investment to get a high quality 24-70 than to get a couple cheaper lenses. 24mm to 70mm is such a versatile range because the 24 is wide enough for most applications, with a little asterisk on there, and the 50 to 70mm range at f2.8 is zoomed in enough to get some nice background compression for things like portraits. There's definitely some specialties that this lens would not be good for, like it's probably not wide enough for real estate photos, and it's definitely not zoomed in enough for wildlife photos. But for 90% of photos, it's awesome. But it's not just the range that makes this a good lens. This lens is an f2.8 aperture, and while that's no match for an f1.2 prime, combined with any RF camera's really good ISO capabilities, this will cover you in pretty much any low light scenario. Plus f2.8 is still low enough to get that nice background blur everyone loves. And it's a good f2.8, not a bad f2.8. And what I mean by that is, well, the nifty 50 f1.8 50mm lens from Canon, that lens went to f1.8 and I used it for years, but it was cheap. And when you shot wide open at f1.8, there was a ton of chromatic aberration and everything but the center of the image was pretty soft. But because this is an L lens, it has much higher quality glass in here, which means even though it's a zoom, it's still super sharp. So that brings me to the glass quality of this lens. A lot of people argue that you shouldn't use a zoom lens because a high quality prime lens will always outperform it in low light, it'll have better background blur, it'll be sharper, all kinds of things. And they'd be right. Prime lenses, because you don't have to change the focal length, usually can have much larger elements to let in more light on the front and have less elements throughout the lens, which means they'll always be a bit sharper and always have lower apertures. But this lens is still super sharp. Maybe if you zoom in side by side and you compare it with a prime, you'll be able to tell. But looking at images from this lens on its own, why would I need my images to be sharper than this? And yeah, primes are great, but have you ever lugged 4 primes around in your camera bag? It's not super fun. I'd rather carry around 2 high-end zooms, for sure. Because at the end of the day, these are still gonna get really sharp results. The only thing I miss about the setup that I have now, the 24-70 and 70-200, is I'm missing something in the wide range. The widest I can go is 24mm on here. Now for most cases, I never need anything wider than 24 anyway, so it's not a huge deal. But for things like vlogging and landscape photos, being able to go all the way to 15mm, that would be really nice. So most likely my next lens purchase is going to be the RF 15-35 f2.8, and then I'll have the holy trinity of the lens system. But until then, I'm going to keep rocking the 24-70 because it is still killing it. I think the best part about it for me is being able to go the whole day shooting without having to worry about changing my lenses. I know I can rock the 24-70 for most of my shots and then maybe here and there switch to the 70-200 for more telephoto applications, but that doesn't come up nearly as often as you'd think. I've shot entire weddings on this lens, I've shot portrait sessions on this lens, and I've shot almost every single YouTube and TikTok video that I've made in the past year on this lens. But I still always have this feeling, and I'm sure a lot of you can relate, this feeling of oh man, maybe if I just had a different lens or a different camera body, or about this next piece of gear, I'd be able to make my photos so much better. They'd be much more sharp, clearer, higher quality, whatever. But at the end of the day, I can shoot almost everything I would ever need to on this setup that I have now. So why would I go out and buy primes that, yeah, will make my images a little bit better, but at the end of the day aren't really benefiting me that much? But that's about it. This lens is awesome. And if you're in a situation where you can only have one solid lens right now, I would highly recommend this, unless you fall into one of those categories I mentioned earlier. But if you want to buy this lens or any of the other camera gear I use, link in the description. I have all of my current gear listed down there. If you like this video, hit that like button. If you want to see more stuff like this, hit the subscribe button. Thanks for watching, and until next time, take it easy.